My next guest is veteran music supervisor Madonna Wade-Reed, who has seamlessly cut back and forth between music supervising film and television. She's helped transform the relationship between TV and music with shows like One Tree Hill and the CW's Smallville, where she did 7 years on that one. The soundtrack, key component in both shows, and the marketing was super important. Then, of course, there's great shows like Summerland and Castle. But today we want to talk about the show that everyone, including my 12-year-old daughter, is talking about, the CW's Reign. So please help me welcome Madonna Wade-Reed.
Thank you.
Hello. How are you, love?
I'm good. I'm really good.
So, fascinating show. Not exactly my super demo, but my youngest, my 12-year-old, is fascinated by it. And it's really an interesting show in the sense that it reminds me of, you know, the only other guy really I've seen do it in a way of using older music, music in a show that's contemporary, Bas Lurman. So tell me how...
He's my inspiration for it.
Yeah, he was great. We'll talk about it more later. But tell me how did you end up getting onto the show?
I had worked with the creator of the show, Laurie McCarthy, many, many years ago, 6 years ago, on a pilot called Windfall. And at the time, I had made her CDs to inspire her while she was writing that show, and she remembered that. And when it came time to find a supervisor to do the series, she asked me to come in and meet with her, where I found out she was still listening to my original CDs of 6 years earlier, which was crazy to me. That's impressive. Flattering, but crazy to me. I had looked at the pilot. I'd created another inspiration mixtape, and we sat there and we listened to it together, and I guess she decided that I got it. I mean, I also think like I'm a 15-year-old girl at heart, and it's just lovely that I have a job where I'm allowed to sort of act out on that. So This was my opportunity, and you know, I got the story she was trying to tell, and I thought I could help.
And where did you learn about how important it is to have music early, the inspiration type mixtapes for writers? How did you learn that process about it early?
I had worked with J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves on Felicity, and while we were doing Felicity, JJ was writing the pilot for Alias, and he came and he talked to my then partner Jennifer Piken and I about this pilot. And while talking about it, it wasn't just the story that was important to him, it was what he was listening to while he was writing it. And I suddenly realized, yes, you know, people aren't just inspired by what they hear afterwards, people are inspired by what they hear while they're creating it. So we started, you know, just trying to share music ahead of a script and ahead of a story, and sometimes that could help shape the story. So I began, when I went out on my own, I would make these inspiration mixtapes for my producers, the writers, because they're breaking stories in their head before I ever see it in a script. And so I thought, if I can give you something that helps you find your story, the course of it, then I'm going to try.
Right. And was it, because it is, you know, a kind of younger demographic show, which is good and bad, and was it hard to get any of the kind of serious, interesting, cool alternative bands into the show, or was everybody receptive?
Everyone has been really receptive to it, and I think because age almost doesn't matter with some of our stories, because the themes of our stories are very universal and they apply to all age groups at, you know, at different points in their lives, so it works. And so having this sort of alternative and indie and a lot of darker music in there has sort of held no boundaries with the age groups.
And talk about the Lumineers doing the theme song and how that was created and why them.
I wasn't a huge part of that. I came in that was done during the pilot process. But my understanding is that they had written this piece of music, and Joel Roman, their agent at Paradigm, had shared that with one of the producers, Brad Silberling, and I believe they just maybe finished it up for us, and it was a great touchstone to start the show with. When you're trying to explain to people what you think you're going to be doing for the next 22 hours of television, to be able to open a conversation and go, "Have you heard the Lumineers? Have you heard Scotland?" That's us.
Right.
Help us build on that.
Now, is 22 episodes a lot of episodes? Does it seem like a lot, or is that kind of a standard?
That's an average. It's an average. We started off with a 13-episode order and crossed our fingers, hoping for a back 9, and then we got it.
Right, the old back 9, right.
Then we crossed our fingers again, and we got a second season.
And so So tell us about what you would think, what would you consider maybe your top 2 favorite pieces of music in this season, and why?
There's the song Navigate by Band of Skulls, which was in an episode, and it was the first time, something that I like to do as a music supervisor, but not everybody will always allow you to do, which is find a song that you can use over as many scenes as possible to really thread them together seamlessly. So we used this song Navigate by Band of Skulls. And
when you say concurrently, scenes running back to back to back that can
yeah,
flow
like
through it, right?
3-minute use at least.
Right.
So that was the first time that I sort of felt like, wow, like we're able to tell 3 people's stories with one song.
Sure.
And it was sort of the first longest placement I had. And then maybe my second one would be in the season finale. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it. Turn down the volume now. When the King of France dies. We were given a heads up about a month in advance of this scene being shot, and I just immediately just dug in my heels and put on my headphones, and I was, in my mind, I had the biggest task in the world. How do you score with a song, the King of France dying? It's a huge historical moment we've chosen to honor, which we don't always, we're
with
not
some cool
always
alternative music, I'm assuming.
We're not always historically accurate, and I also, you know, sometimes I think in layers well below what you're seeing on screen that sometimes is purely to satisfy my own nerdiness, but King of France is dying. Why not take this amazing alternative French artist Woodkid and use that? And it's about a 2.5-minute use, and it fills in the blanks when there isn't dialogue, and it's emotional, and it's strong, and it's confusing, and it's everything you want a viewer to experience when you're losing a really major important character.
So did you go like thematically, did you go look at like Phoenix or Air and other French bands first before you went to other stuff?
I think I kind of knew. I had used a small piece of one of his other songs earlier in the season, and there was some connection for me between the sound that he creates, which I think is timeless and unusual and different, and I don't think anyone else can be compared to what he's doing right now. And I just knew that we would hear him again.
Right. So bands like Codaline and Ed Harcourt and the Broods, you've used all this kind of interesting stuff.
London Grammar, Agnes Obel, the lovely, lovely Gabrielle Aplin we've used twice, ironically, both times with covers. We like to slide those in every once in a while.
And how have all the labels and publishers been receptive to your terms? I mean, what?
People have been amazing. I think because we're a historically based show, there's nothing questionable happening on screen that anybody would disapprove of participating in. And in fact, it went even further in the other direction. We used a Vitamin String Quartet cover of the Lorde song Royals.
Of course you had to. You had to use Royals.
At a wedding reception. And it came at a time when that song, as performed by her, had been, heard everywhere. Everyone knew the song.
I'm sure they were getting a little protective at that point.
And yes, it had become a song that maybe didn't need to be licensed anymore. And I had been told that when Lorde had been presented with a list of all the different shows that were coming up on television in the fall, when she heard about our show, her response was, "Oh, I love Mary Queen of Scots. They can use anything they want from my record."
She'd obviously read some history books in school.
Except Royals.
Except Royals.
Except Royals. But then I had been doing some research, and I love the sound of the Vitamin String Quartet. Our executive producer, Brad Silberling, had heard them on the radio over the holidays, Christmas holidays, and I thought, oh, why am I not using their stuff? I love their stuff. And when I opened up a Google search, one of the first things that came up was that they'd covered Royals. And I was like, no, no. Went to the publisher and said, I know she's not feeling this song right now, but
what if it was a different version?
What if I had a string quartet version? And she approved it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
so we try and honor our sound. We try and honor all the different ages watching us, and most of all, we try and honor the story.
Right. So I read a quote from your showrunner. she talked about, I think the line was that she said, you know, it's a soundtrack, but they're not actually listening to the music, which is, I thought was very interesting justification for being able to use this fish out of water music, shall we say. And so talk about the process of picking the music and that whole theory about, yeah, it's cool to use this music because they're not actually listening to it in the show, but you are, which I kind of love that.
It's a very, very fine line that we walk, both thematically and how we place the audio. We're very careful to never make it sound like it's really in the room. It's an accompaniment.
Nobody's putting on record players or things like that.
No
that
record
didn't exist.
players. We actually don't put musicians on camera. It's just a very difficult thing to match.
Sure.
So we just, first and foremost, I try and honor the story that Laurie's trying to tell. And then I take into consideration that it is Renaissance, 15th century France. And so I do look for things with an instrumentation that is a nod. We tip our hat to the sound, mandolins and different instruments and flutes, but then we just modernize it. And so I just try and take all of that into consideration when I'm seeing what the story is. I know what I'm trying to propel forward with the song, and also please the fans. I want people to like what they hear. I want them to discover new things. I want them to turn off the TV and go look for it.
Right. And CW used to do it. I don't know if they still do it with cards at the end. They still do it?
They still do it. It eats time out of your own episode, so it's not always easy to give them.
Right. How often do you guys give cards for stuff?
We haven't done very many. And it's reserved for more larger, major labels. It helps you offset your costs.
Right, it's also a negotiation factor to be able to say, hey, I know you don't want it, but I'll give you a card and blah, 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 right?
And I'm really lucky in that I use a lot of independent music that, you know, I get for a very fair price, so I don't need that negotiating tool.
Do you try to do favored nations as far as set one price, or is it just you work with it's all the negotiation? Life is a negotiation.
Yep. Because there's every level and caliber of music in the show.
Right.
I can't pay, you know, what I pay the Goo Goo Dolls to an independent, you know, band with a 3-song EP.
And have you done much promotional stuff? Has anybody offered to do videos for you or in conjunction with?
No, yeah, I'm pretty convinced that I'm the one providing the music video.
Right, no.
I'm the free music video when the song goes under a great scene.
But have you seen labels market off the show much at all on any of their artists? Have you seen anything, you know, that stands out to you that thought was cool?
Not yet. I mean, I get a lot of support from the artists on Twitter. They blast social media.
That's important.
As soon as they know I send out an alert the week of an episode, and I let everybody involved with every artist, the songwriter, the artist, the publisher, the label. I let everybody know your song's coming up. I do it in part because I think a lot of musicians, their parents truly don't believe what they're doing for a living. And I feel like you can send your mom an email. Yes, and I was played by an artist. He emailed me the phone message he got from his mom.
Oh, that's beautiful.
After she heard his song on the show. So I do it for those purposes, and I do it because it just, you know, the social media of it, it's a grassroots thing to build our audience. And And if I can do my part, building it one song at a time, then
it's a big part of things.
I'm willing to do it.
How big is your selection committee of people who have to sign off on you pitch a song? How big a crew is it?
It takes a village.
Of course.
If I'm really committed to something before it's ever cut in, I'll have a discussion with Laurie McCarthy and Brad Silberling and Ned Bastille and Maureen Milligan, like my immediate
so that's the 4
EPs and producers, yes, who I'm physically working with in the same room sometimes. It starts with them, and I'll make a plea if I think that I have an idea that would really work. But then once we get footage, just because I think it's a good idea doesn't necessarily mean it'll match my footage. Once it gets cut in, it goes through every producer again. Then it goes through studio, then it goes through network.
So we mentioned earlier Bas Lurman has done this well. The first time I remember seeing it is Moulin Rouge, and you're like, oh, that's interesting. What other TV shows do you remember that have done this?
I can't think of very many. I mean, I feel like he broke the mold doing it in films and doing it in a way that's taught me how I do it when I talk about honoring instrumentation, but yet still doing something modern, which is what we try to do. But I don't ever recall it in TV. I recall it in Knight's Tale, you know.
Knight's Tale, that was We Will Rock You. I was trying to think about what that movie was. Thank you.
Yes, that was, a lot of people bring that up when they hear, you know, how I blur
But he made
my
it,
lines.
that was like viewed as like, that is weird, that's not cool. But Bas made it cool.
He made it cool.
And so now you take it to the next level and bring it to the TV mainstream. So I wonder if that's going to be a groundbreaker in TV that more people take and take liberties, shall we say.
I think more people should and more people could. I think the reason I get away with it and that I have successfully endeared fans to the show in terms of the music is because I totally trust them, and I think they're smart, and I think they want to be challenged, and I think they want to hear and see interesting ideas, and this is a really interesting, odd pairing, but it works.
And so let's take me back a little bit. So how long have you been music supervising for now?
About 14 years, I think.
Okay, so yeah, we ain't getting any younger. But anyway, you're doing amazing stuff, and you worked on some, like we talked about in the intro, some great shows that really helped revolutionize the music play in TV. So talk about what you remember, some of the shows early on that you worked on that you felt broke a lot of ground and opened the door up a little bit to music in a better place than just sandwiched in, you know.
First and foremost, Felicity. I did a couple seasons of Felicity with Jennifer Peiken, and throwing back to J.J. Abrams and Matt Reeves again, they were the first people who just had no rules about music. And they didn't save music for in between, and they didn't save music for when people weren't talking. They used music all the time. And there was a freedom that came with it that sort of opened the doors even wider for using music in environments when maybe you hadn't used them before, where it didn't necessarily have to have a radio in the room to have a song. And I sort of took that courage and that freedom with me, and we used it when we did a couple seasons of Alias. And then I felt like I really, really got to blossom as a music supervisor was when I did Smallville. I did 7 of the 10 seasons.
Right.
And Miles Miller and Al Goff were so trusting and believed in my instincts and let me put music in places that, once again, people didn't necessarily want to put them, or use music that people weren't necessarily paying attention to. They let me test drive it.
Right. And have you lined up a soundtrack for Rain as of yet?
Not yet. I mean, soundtracks don't do as well as they used to.
Still,
but
that's a great compilation, though, for people.
I think we might do something digitally. We're talking about it. It's a digital world.
It is a digital world.
So we're talking about it.
Well, great. Thank you so much for coming in. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody watch Rain. 2nd season will start in September, I guess?
Maybe October.
Maybe October.
Maybe
Madonna Wade-Reed, everybody. Thank you so much for your time. That was most awesome.
Thank you.
For more Q-Score, please check us out at emPOWERme.tv to find out what goes on behind the curtain and how the film and TV music gets made. It happens right here. Tune in.